Michael Famuroti, who is the chief economist at Vertiva Capital Management. Michael, thanks for joining us via Skype. Let's get this conversation on to you. Do you consider this a curtain raiser for Buhari's administration in the much talked about sale of national assets?
I don't think so. I think this is a more complex and specific transaction. Like you said, it's something that has been in the offing since about 2002. And even at conception, the ownership of the company, that's the minting company, was split between the central CBN, can't remember the precise name, I think it's the De La Rue company. So it's always had a bit of private ownership. And I think the press release that came out of the federal government yesterday mentioned that the De La Rue company are the private sector partners to the CBN on this transaction. So my take is that it's the CBN trying to get them greater influence and role, because if you look at the comments made about technology and all that, the CBN does not have the expertise for that. It's not a security agency, but private sector participant that has been helping out with the mint since 1963. They have the skills and expertise needed to deliver on the promised benefits of technology that the Vice President mentioned.
Yeah, we've seen, according to the central bank, we've seen a turnaround of the NSPMC, not much in terms of whether it's now making tons of millions of naira or billions or as much as it prints. But of course, it's no longer a loss-making company like in previous decades since 1963. Now, the company is back on its foot. At least it has new printing facilities and all of that, all since around 2015, when the central bank took it over. And of course, the arrangement for the privatization, which started under the Obasanjo's administration, was reversed. And the central bank came in as a strategic investor and now has a main say in who becomes the managing director, who are the executive directors, what business does the minting do as a PLC here.
Sorry?
Yeah, so my question, Michael, was that do you see the strategic investment of the central bank over the last 3 years as a game changer here for the minting company?
So, like I mentioned, I think the real game changer here in terms of difference in what we've seen over the last couple of decades is the role of the private partners. Because when you're talking about the actual security expertise, whether you are referring to printing currency or other security documents like visas, like passports, when you're considering the ability to actually transform that and do it in a more efficient, technologically driven way, that's going to depend on how much influence and role the private sector participants is going to have, right? So it remains to be seen how the strategic investments or even this transfer of part ownership is going to change that dynamic, because moving from the federal government or moving from BPE to CBN and any sort of other strategic investment might be moot if it's still effectively run by some form of quasi-public agency.
Do you think the NSPMC, PLC, in the hands of the private sector will be a money spinning machine?
Well, I mean, literally, that's what they are asked to do. I'm not sure the sort of effect it's going to have generally beyond the company itself, but the expectation is that with greater influence or greater participation from the private sector participants, then we would expect a more efficient service. And, you know, it's where we were perhaps in the 70s and 80s, where a lot of the top management and a lot of the work was being driven by the private participants. Over time, that sort of changed, and perhaps the culture and efficiency of the firm got a bit diluted. And that is something that we may be looking to reverse. Obviously, there are other challenges in terms of security and oversight, but in terms of efficiency and culture, even our previous experience suggests that there is a reason we get these private sector experts on board in such a technical and complex issue.
Michael, my first question to you was if this divestment by the federal government to the CBN was a curtain raiser for the much talked about sale of national assets, and your answer was an emphatic no. So let's revisit privatization and concessions program under the 3.5-year-old Buhari's administration. What's the market, what's the economy looking to when it comes to the sale of national assets?
I think, just to caveat your earlier question, any asset sale is an asset sale, regardless of strategic importance or length of time in which the transaction has been going on, right? But there are important ones. And I think looking at asset sales in the last 5 years, the one industry that has been eyed a lot is the oil and gas sector and the energy sector. And that's where really the key strategic asset sales are likely to come from, right? So if you look at NLNG, for example, and the experience of that, right? That's the sort of thing that we are looking for. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of years, actually for longer, of listing the joint venture businesses on the stock exchange. That's not something that has made headway and yet has been mooted since at least 2013. So it's the oil and gas sector asset sales that are the most complex, but arguably are the most important. Unsurprisingly, given how long the different elements of the PIB have stored in the legislature and presidency, it's unsurprising that asset sales in that industry have also not really been forthcoming, even though they are the ones that we probably need the most.
So you think the administration has been a bit of a slow motion or sluggish on the sale of national assets and other strategic issues around it?
Yeah, I don't think there's been that much traction. I think there have been sales, but nothing to really get the blood boiling. And if you also look at revenue generated, I know that the 2018 budget highlighted significant divestments, especially in the oil and gas sector, as I think that's also was raised somewhere around 300 billion naira. Again, not much has been forthcoming. So the action, like you said, has been slower than what the promise indicated.
A final one. But do we agree that the administration needs this 17 billion naira, which the VP says will go into the treasury? That's a lot of money, even by today's inflation, whatever rate at which you're looking at it.
Well, I mean, I think, in my opinion, 17 billion naira for the federal government is relatively small. And the decision around the ownership of the printing press should really be determined by issues of efficiency and long-term sustainability as opposed to revenue, because you are not going to raise much. I mean, 17 billion is in a budget of 9 trillion. That's a drop in the ocean, right? So you cannot be looking at these small privatizations as revenue drivers, right? You have to be looking at them from an efficiency, security, and sustainability perspective, which I hope we've been doing for the printing press.
Okay, fair enough, Michael. But if you got 17 billion and you want to drop it in the ocean, just drop it where I am. Don't drop it in the ocean. I'm sure a lot of folks will jump into the ocean looking for that money. It's still a pile of cash anyway. But for governments, for a GDP like ours, if it's not in dollars, if it's in naira, then I'm sure it's still a drop in the ocean. Thank you very much. Very nice way of putting it. Michael Famuruti, Chief Economist at Vetifa Capital.